Loud music filled the room, the glow of the chandeliers reflected off the champagne glasses, and the air was filled with the sweet smell of expensive perfume. Laughter echoed, conversations interspersed with toasts, smiles and glances exchanged in the heat of the night. But none of that mattered to me. My eyes were fixed on a single scene, and everything around me seemed to dissolve. The sight hit me like a punch in the gut. My wife's lover asked her to dance, there, right in front of me. His hand held hers tightly, a gesture of possession, of defiance. Her laugh, so familiar, so intimate, hit me with the force of a slap. As if nothing was wrong. As if I wasn't there. I was frozen. My body didn't respond, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood ringing in my ears. My world fell apart in slow motion. Every detail stuck in my memory like a sharp blade, the way he touched her waist, the way she threw her head back in satisfied laughter, the way their bodies moved in sync, a perfect fit that I didn't want to see it, but it was there, rubbed in my face. She didn't even bother to disguise it. He didn't try to hide it. He didn't move away when he saw me. On the contrary, he stared at me. Not with guilt, not with regret. But with something that felt like fun. Adrenaline coursed through every fiber of my body. I could have withdrawn, I could have left without saying anything, I could have kept that poison inside me and waited for the right moment. But no. Not this time. Not after everything I did for her, not after years of dedication, sleepless nights, sacrifices that she didn't even realize. I took a deep breath and moved forward, each step like a hammer driven into the ground. The music continued, but now it sounded distant. The guests stopped. The laughter stopped. And then, without hesitation, without fear, without a single drop of pity, I announced, in a firm and cutting voice, I want a divorce. The silence was instantaneous. All eyes fell on us. The lover stopped, surprised but not embarrassed. He already knew. Maybe he even liked the scene. But she, oh, she. For a brief moment, I saw the panic in his eyes. Small, contained, but it was there. As if he had finally understood the extent of what he had done. As if reality had nailed his mask of false security. But it was only an instant. Soon, his lips curved into a half-smile. Here. In front of everyone. Her voice was calm, controlled, as if I were just a child throwing a tantrum. Yes. Here and now, I replied, feeling the anger bubbling inside me but not allowing it to boil over. I wouldn't give her the pleasure of seeing me fall apart. If you weren't ashamed to betray me in front of everyone, I won't be ashamed to expose who you really are. The surprise was general. Murmurs began to spread, awkward looks among the guests. Some looked away, others stared, absorbing the drama as if they were watching a live theater performance. The truth is that no one there really cared. People love a scandal, they love to see someone fall. I knew that. But at that moment, nothing else mattered. I needed to free myself. I needed to crush that illusion I carried for so long. Her lover, who until then seemed comfortable in the role of discreet villain, finally decided to speak out. I think we can talk about this somewhere else. His voice was calculated, like a man used to escaping sticky situations without a scratch. I laughed. A bitter, piercing laugh. Now you want discretion. After dancing with my wife in front of me? He didn't respond. His expression changed, subtly, as if he was reconsidering the risk he was taking. He didn't expect that. I didn't expect me to react. Perhaps she was waiting for a defeated man, a betrayed husband who would retreat in silence to mourn his humiliation. But no. Not today. What no one knew, what not even I could predict, was that this was just the beginning. I was about to discover that the betrayal ran much deeper than I imagined. That the game they played was far from being a simple adventure. Because the moment I stood up to them both, the moment I made my decision to end this farce of a marriage, something changed. And that's when everything started to fall apart. Not for me. But for them. That same night, something happened that turned everything upside down. Something that no one, not even her, expected. Because at the end of the day, fate always finds a way to take its toll. And when the truth came to light, when the secrets began to unravel, it was he, the lover, who threw her to the wolves. He was the one who exposed what she tried to hide. He was the one who made her pay for what she did. I thought I lost everything that night. But in the end, I was the one who won. Welcome to the channel. Here, we never support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they carry a brutal truth. Betrayal destroys lives, corrodes relationships and leaves scars that never disappear. Each narrative is a portrait of the devastating impact of disloyalty, showing that every choice has consequences. Get ready for a shocking story, full of twists, intense emotions and an ending you don't expect. Adjust your headphones, because what comes next will shake you. The club's ballroom was spacious, lit by imposing chandeliers that cast a soft light over the elegantly decorated tables. The ambient music mixed with the clinking of crystal glasses and the buzz of conversations that spread throughout the room. Among the guests, Ethan and Olivia seemed like the perfect couple. He, a man with a striking presence, wearing a well-tailored suit that highlighted his firm and confident posture. She, wrapped in a blue dress that highlighted her skin and eyes, smiled at the guests with the elegance of someone who knew how to behave in any environment. They had been married for 10 years and, for everyone there, they represented a solid relationship, a partnership based on respect and love. At least that was the image they projected. Ethan was a successful businessman, owner of a chain of restaurants that he had built from scratch with a lot of effort. He had always been a dedicated man, both to business and to his family. He had spent years dedicating himself to providing Olivia with stability, ensuring that she never had to worry about anything. Always attentive, he never forgot important dates, always presented her with flowers for no apparent reason and made a point of reminding her daily how special she was to him. Olivia, in turn, was the type of woman who enchanted everyone. Owner of natural beauty and refined intelligence, she was always the center of attention at any event. Working as an interior designer, she spent her days immersed in projects that transformed houses into sophisticated homes. His talent was undeniable, as was his ability to captivate those around him. The relationship between the two always seemed balanced. Ethan was the firm foundation, Olivia, the light breeze that made life more beautiful. In the early years, everything between them was intense. The unexpected trips, the candlelit dinners, the late nights talking about the future. But time, relentless as always, tried to mold that initial passion into something more serene. The moments of intensity gave way to a comfortable routine, where both knew exactly what to expect from each other. For Ethan, this was the natural course of marriage. For Olivia, it was as if something essential had been lost along the way. Over the past few weeks, Ethan had noticed subtle changes in his wife. Small details that would previously have gone unnoticed began to accumulate. The cell phone that used to be forgotten in any corner of the house was now always close by. The messages exchanged quickly, the discreet smiles in front of the screen. The unexpected commitments, the dinners with friends that seemed more and more frequent. He wondered if he was just paranoid or if something was really wrong. But I preferred to believe that they were just phases. That every relationship went through ups and downs. After all, Olivia was always by his side. He was always loyal. There was no reason to be suspicious. The night of the party was special. Ethan's company's annual event brought together friends, business partners and family in a sophisticated and lively environment. He had worked hard to make that night unforgettable. He wanted Olivia to have fun, to be proud of what he had achieved. But something seemed out of place. Ever since they arrived, Olivia had been restless. His gaze roamed the room as if he were looking for someone. Ethan tried to ignore the uncomfortable feeling, but her restlessness was starting to bother him. He tried to pull her onto the dance floor, something they used to do together in their early years, but Olivia refused with a soft smile, claiming she needed to talk to some people first. He nodded, even though he felt a slight discomfort settle in his chest. Throughout the evening, Ethan was kept busy greeting guests, discussing new projects, and exchanging formal words with business partners. But whenever he had a free moment, his eyes searched Olivia around the room. She was radiant, as always, but there was something different. The way he laughed louder than usual, the way his posture seemed more open, like he was waiting for something. He tried to shake off the insecurity that was beginning to creep into his mind, but that night was full of small details that he couldn't ignore. It was when his eyes found her on the other side of the room that everything inside him stopped for an instant. Olivia was talking to a man he recognized immediately. That face, that confident smile, that presence that seemed to dominate the environment. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine when he saw the way he held her waist while he said something close to her ear. Her laugh came soon after, loose, natural, intimate. As if there was nothing wrong. As if that were normal. The music seemed to have gotten louder, or maybe it was Ethan's heart hammering against his chest. He clenched his fists out of instinct, but didn't move. He watched, waiting for Olivia to take a step back, to move away, to somehow demonstrate that it meant nothing. But she didn't do any of that. On the contrary. She remained there, completely comfortable, while the other man lightly pulled her by the hand, guiding her to the dance floor. Ethan stood still, feeling the ground disappear beneath his feet. A mixture of disbelief and fury was building inside him, but he hadn't exploded yet. He wanted to believe that he was interpreting everything wrong, that this was just an innocent gesture between acquaintances. But every fiber of his body told him it wasn't. Olivia has never behaved like this before. She had never been so open with another man in his presence. She never allowed anyone to touch her like that. And now, here, in the middle of a party where he was the host, where everyone could see them, she didn't even care. As if his presence meant nothing. As if he no longer existed. The dance floor was filled with couples. The sound of music mixed with the noise of conversations, but Ethan heard nothing but his own inner silence. That suffocating silence that precedes the storm. His mind screamed for him to do something. So that he could stop that scene before it went too far. So that he could take control of the situation. But he didn't move. Not at that moment. Because part of him wanted to see how far this would go. How far would Olivia allow that to happen? He wanted to know if there was still something between them or if, at that very moment, he was being erased from history without even having the right to fight. Ethan took a deep breath. Anger rose like a fire burning inside, but he kept his expression firm. It wasn't time yet. But when he did, he would make sure everyone there knew who Olivia really was. And most importantly, who he really was. Ethan couldn't move. The blood pulsed in his temples as he watched Olivia and that man dancing in the center of the dance floor. The music seemed to have been drowned out by the sound of his own heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to believe that it was just an error in perception, that his mind was distorting the facts, but everything he saw there was clear as the light of the chandeliers that shone above their heads. She smiled at him like she hadn't smiled at Ethan in a long time. Her eyes sparkled with an enthusiasm he hadn't seen in a long time. The other man's touch was safe, confident, and Olivia showed no resistance. On the contrary, his posture was one of surrender. And it was there, at that moment, that Ethan felt something break inside him. The gazes around were already subtly turning to the scene. Some women murmured among themselves, some men raised their eyebrows, perhaps out of curiosity, perhaps out of amusement. But no one approached. It was like watching a spectacle in real time, a piece of drama that unfolded before everyone without anyone daring to intervene. Ethan felt the air around him grow heavy, his fists instinctively clenching. He always believed that his marriage, despite its ups and downs, was solid. That Olivia was a woman of integrity. But there, In the middle of the dance floor, she denied everything. Taking a deep breath, he decided to move away a little. I wouldn't make a scene. Not there. He needed clarity, he needed to understand exactly what was happening before he reacted. He walked to the bar and ordered a double whiskey. The waiter served him without hesitation, as if he had seen this story repeated so many times before. Ethan took the glass and downed part of the liquid at once, feeling the alcohol burn his throat. He tried to concentrate, tried to search for some rational explanation, but his instinct screamed that the truth was right in front of him, and it was crueler than any excuse Olivia could come up with. The minutes dragged by. He watched as Olivia and her lover discreetly left the dance floor, his hands still resting on her waist. On impulse, Ethan followed them from afar. The room was big, but he knew every corner of that club. I knew the corridors that led to the side garden, the place where many couples went out for more intimate conversations. His heart beat faster with each step. This was not an act of paranoia. It was a real feeling. Something inside him told him that when he turned the next corner, nothing would be the same. He stopped before reaching the exit of the hall, partially hiding behind one of the columns that faced the hall. And then, he saw it. Olivia and the man were there, too close. The lover held her face with both hands, saying something in a low, intimate tone, and she didn't back down. On the contrary, she smiled. A smile Ethan recognized well. The smile she gave him at the beginning of their marriage, when she was still completely his. The smile of someone who was giving themselves away. And then, before he could react, he saw what he should never have seen. The man leaned over to Olivia and kissed her. It wasn't a stolen kiss, it wasn't a mistake. It was intentional, intense, full of desire. And worst of all, she responded. Her arms wrapped around his neck naturally, their bodies moved even closer, and Ethan felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. The whiskey weighed in his stomach like lead. The scene burned his eyes like hot coals. He wanted to advance, he wanted to force them apart, he wanted to scream, but he couldn't. He stood there, frozen, like a spectator of his own tragedy. The kiss only lasted a few seconds, but for Ethan it was an eternity. When they finally pulled away, the lover ran his fingers over Olivia's face, as if he wanted to record that moment. And she, still wrapped in that bubble of adrenaline, laughed softly before saying something that Ethan couldn't hear. But he didn't need to hear it. There was nothing to justify that. Nothing that would erase what had just happened. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to control the wave of emotions that threatened to explode inside him. When he opened them again, Olivia and her lover were already walking away, walking calmly back to the room, as if nothing had happened. As if that kiss was just a detail, a banal moment among so many others. Ethan stood there, still, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on him. She was no longer a suspect. It was no longer baseless paranoia. His wife was cheating on him. And he had just seen it with his own eyes. Anger was growing inside him, pulsing, untamed. But instead of giving in to the urge to confront her right then, something inside him whispered that it was better to wait. That there was something bigger behind that betrayal, something he didn't yet know. And when the truth came out, he wouldn't be the only one to suffer the consequences. Ethan felt the blood pulsing through his veins as he crossed the room, each step firmer, more determined. The bitter taste of betrayal still burned in his mouth, but now it wasn't just about Olivia's infidelity. There was something more. Something he hadn't yet fully understood, but was about to reveal itself. He didn't know exactly what awaited him, but inside, he felt that the night wasn't over yet. On the contrary, it was just beginning. Olivia stood near the bar, a smile on her lips as she held a glass of wine. The lover was at his side, relaxed, as if nothing had happened. As if they hadn't just betrayed Ethan just a few feet away. Ethan approached slowly, his heart hammering in his chest, but his face remained serene. He didn't want to make a scandal. Not yet. I wanted answers. I wanted to understand how far the lie went. And when he finally stopped in front of them, Olivia looked up, surprised by his sudden presence, but without losing her composure. He held her gaze for a moment before speaking, his voice low but carrying a weight she recognized immediately. He knew. And she realized it right away. The silence between the three was cutting. The lover looked away, adjusting his collar as if he wanted to move away from the scene. But Ethan wouldn't let him go unharmed. Ethan took a deep breath before speaking, but his voice came out steady, sharp as a blade. Did you guys have fun? Olivia blinked, as if trying to buy time to formulate a response, but there was no more room for lies. She opened her mouth, but quickly closed it. The lover, realizing that he wouldn't get out of that situation so easily, cleared his throat before saying something, trying to maintain a pose of superiority. I think we can resolve this in a more civilized way. Ethan let out a dry, humorless laugh. Civilized? He repeated, relishing the irony of the word. You didn't think about that when you were kissing in secret, did you? Olivia's face lost some color. She opened her mouth again, but Ethan raised his hand, cutting her off before any excuses could come out. I don't want to hear lies. I just want to understand. Since when? Olivia hesitated, as if she was about to deny everything, but then something in her face changed. Perhaps he realized that there was no longer any way out. Maybe she noticed that Ethan was no longer the man she could manipulate with sweet words. Then, she let out a sigh and finally spoke, her voice a little shaky. A few months. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He was already expecting that answer, but hearing it out loud made everything even more real. The lover, in turn, remained silent. He didn't seem willing to expose himself any more than necessary. But then, Ethan noticed something in Olivia's eyes. Something that wasn't just guilt. It was fear. He frowned, watching her more closely. The way she kept her gaze down, as if she feared what would come next. And then, like a slap, something made sense. Betrayal was not the end of that story. It was just the beginning. Something was wrong. Something much bigger than simple infidelity. Ethan looked at his lover, and suddenly, he realized that his security was beginning to unravel. He was restless, his hands were sweating. Ethan felt his adrenaline spike, a part of him already knowing that the truth that was about to come out of someone's mouth would change everything. It was Olivia who broke the silence first. And her words made Ethan's world spin. He used me. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, but sharp. Her lover immediately turned to her, eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Olivia continued, now firmer, more bitter. He manipulated me. He said he loved me, that he was willing to be with me, but the truth is he never wanted anything more than a game. Ethan frowned, not completely understanding. But her lover moved, and that was enough for him to realize that, yes, Olivia was telling the truth. Something was wrong, something he still didn't fully understand. And it was then that the lover lost his patience. Oh, don't give me that now, Olivia. His voice was strained, full of frustration. You knew very well what you were doing. Nobody forced you to do anything. Ethan looked from one to the other, trying to fit the pieces together. But Olivia looked at him, and her look was pleading. He was blackmailing me. Ethan blinked, not immediately understanding. But then, Olivia continued, now in a louder voice, as if she needed to get that weight off her chest. He has messages, photos. Things I should never have sent. He said if I didn't go through with it, he would show everything. And it was as if the ground had opened up beneath Ethan's feet. The lover was not just a lover. He was a manipulator, an opportunist who had infiltrated his life, used his wife, and now tried to extricate himself from the situation as if nothing had happened. Ethan slowly turned to the man, his anger reaching a level he didn't know existed. Did you blackmail her? His voice was low, but each word carried crushing weight. The man opened his arms, trying to defend himself. She's not telling the whole truth. This was consensual. But Olivia didn't back down. He threatened to tell you before I had the courage to do it. He said if I tried to pull away, he would text everyone we know. It made me continue with something I had wanted to finish for a long time. Ethan felt his breathing quicken. The betrayal was already a hard blow, but knowing that Olivia had been manipulated, coerced, made everything take on another perspective. He turned completely towards his lover, his eyes burning with hatred. You played dirty. The other man tried to maintain his composure, but it was clear that the situation was beyond his control. I didn't do anything she didn't want. Ethan smiled, a humorless smile, filled with something dangerous. That's what we're going to find out. He still didn't know how, but that story wouldn't end there. His wife's lover may have believed he would get away with it, but now it was Ethan who had control. And he would make sure that that man paid dearly for everything he did. The silence that fell between the three was dense, heavy as lead. Olivia looked away, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. The lover, in turn, tried to maintain his composure, but the restless fingers gave away his nervousness. Ethan felt a growing heat rise through his body, not just anger, but something deeper, something he couldn't name yet. The revelation that Olivia had been manipulated was bittersweet. The betrayal was still real, it still hurt, but there were more layers to the story than he could imagine. And now, he needed to decide what to do with it. Olivia looked up at Ethan, as if trying to gauge his reaction, as if hoping for some crumb of compassion. But he gave her nothing. I couldn't. She betrayed him. He let himself go. Regardless of the blackmail, she crossed the line. And now she was there, asking for something she couldn't even name. The lover, realizing that the situation was beyond his control, tried to take back the reins. This is going too far, he said, straightening his jacket as if trying to maintain a dignity that no longer existed. We don't need to turn this into a circus. Ethan let out a low, cold laugh. Do you think you can just walk out of here like nothing happened? He took a step forward, closing the distance between the two. You played with the wrong woman. And worse, the wrong husband. The man raised his hands in a gesture of false calm. You don't need to do anything impulsive. I know you're angry, but it won't get you anywhere. Ethan tilted his head, a humorless smile appearing on his lips. No. Well, I think it will. Do you really believe you'll get away with this? Do you think it will end here, at this party, as if it were just any disagreement? Olivia finally intervened. Ethan, please. His voice was a threat. He turned to her, his eyes hard, piercing. Do you really want to ask me for something now? After all this? She opened her mouth but couldn't respond. Her lover, however, seemed to regain some of his arrogance. You can do whatever you want, but the truth is your wife isn't that innocent, he said, crossing his arms. She didn't put up as much of a fight as she's making it out to be. Ethan felt anger explode inside him. His fist clenched, and before he could stop himself, his hand had already hit the man in the face with enough force to make him stagger back. A murmur echoed around. People had noticed. Some were already looking, whispering. But Ethan didn't care anymore. The lover raised his hand to his face, his eyes wide. You're crazy. Ethan took another step, his voice low and clipped. And you are a worm. He looked around. The tension in the room was evident. The furtive glances, the whispers that spread like wildfire. Olivia looked small, her arms crossed over her body, her eyes full of terror. I think that's enough for both of you, Ethan concluded, straightening his shoulders. If you want to continue this joke, do it away from me. But I guarantee one thing, this isn't over yet. He turned to leave, but before he took the first step, he heard his lover's voice, full of sarcasm and something else, something that made him stop. Ah, but it's over for you, Ethan. You just haven't realized it yet. Ethan stopped. Slowly, she turned to face him. What did you say? The man smiled, a cynical, provocative smile. You think I'm the only one? You think this is the first time? You have no idea, Ethan. The statement came in like a blade, tearing away every bit of composure Ethan still held. Olivia's eyes widened, fear now written across every feature of her face. No, she said, her voice shaking. Don't say anything. But it was already too late. The lover laughed, a sound full of venom. The truth, my friend, is that you never had control. Didn't you realize that your wife had left that marriage a long time ago? Ethan looked at Olivia, waiting for any sign that this was a lie. But all he saw was despair. Genuine despair. And that said more than any answer. His stomach turned. So it wasn't just a betrayal. It wasn't just a slip-up. It was something much bigger. How many times? His voice was low, but filled with something dark. Olivia hesitated, guilt spilling over her face. But then, she did something Ethan never imagined she would do. She lowered her head. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. She just stood there, still, as if she already knew she had lost any chance of redemption. The silence was unbearable. Then, finally, Ethan spoke, his voice colder than ever. I was a fool for believing you. But don't worry, Olivia. You'll have all the time in the world to regret this. He turned and left, crossing the hall under the watchful eyes of the guests. He didn't look back. It didn't need to. I knew that, from that moment on, nothing would be the same again. But deep down, a single question was pounding in his mind: how long had he been made a fool of? The night seemed to stretch on and on as Ethan left the room behind, the muffled sounds of murmurs and music becoming a distant echo. His body was tense, his chest inflated with a contained anger that mixed fury and disbelief. Olivia's lover's words still reverberated in his mind like a slowly spreading poison, eating away at everything he thought he knew about his own life. He always believed that despite the challenges, their marriage was based on some form of respect, that Olivia would never cross the line so deliberately and repeatedly. But now, there was nothing left but the certainty of deception, of manipulation, of prolonged betrayal that he had never suspected. The night air was cold when he left the club, but the heat of his anger made his body vibrate. He walked aimlessly until he reached his car, but hesitated before getting in. He knew he couldn't just go home as if nothing had happened, as if that night hadn't brutally rewritten his history. He sat in the driver's seat, hands on the steering wheel, but didn't start the car. His gaze was fixed on nothingness, lost in the fragments of what was left of his sanity. He took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts, but all he could feel was the bitter taste of humiliation. Hours before, he was a man who believed in the love he built, the choices he made, the woman he chose to share his life. Now, it was nothing like that. Now he was a man betrayed, deceived, ridiculed by someone who should have been his partner. Worst of all, it wasn't just a matter of infidelity, but of continual deception, of deliberate choices she made to keep him in the dark while she gave herself to another life. How many times? How many were there before that one? He would never know for sure. But he knew one thing: Olivia would never have power over him again. His phone vibrated in his pocket, but he ignored it. He knew the messages would bring nothing but more pain. Probably Olivia, trying to justify the unjustifiable. Or perhaps an empty apology, an attempt to turn things around. None of that mattered anymore. For the first time, he felt he was free. But this freedom was accompanied by a weight that crushed his chest. Everything he built, all the trust, all the history, destroyed in a single night. He felt suffocated by the idea that the love he thought he experienced never really existed. It was an illusion. And now, he needed to decide what he would do with what was left of him. Minutes later, when she finally started the car, she didn't drive home. I didn't want to face that space where so many memories were created, where every corner held a piece of life that I now knew had been a lie. I needed air. He needed to understand how to move forward without allowing the grudge to completely consume him. But deep down, I knew there was no easy answer. He knew this pain would stay with him for a long time. As he drove aimlessly, the events of the party played out in his mind like a repetitive and cruel movie. Olivia's look when she was unmasked, her lover's tone of voice, full of sarcasm and superiority, as if he were the victor in that situation. Thinking about it made Ethan's blood boil again. It wasn't enough to be betrayed. It wasn't enough to lose everything I believed I had. He still had to endure the arrogance of a man who used his wife, who manipulated her, who thought he would get away with all of this. Anger burned inside, but something began to change. For the first time in hours, he realized he was no longer a hostage to betrayal. That now, the choices were his. Olivia had already taken hers, and in doing so, destroyed any possibility of redemption. But Ethan still had power over what he did with what was left. He could choose to make this pain the center of his life or allow it to be just a chapter in his story. The betrayal was a fact, but what came after was still in his hands. The phone vibrated again, and this time, he looked at the screen. Olivia. Ignored. He already knew everything he needed to know. There were no more words that could change what happened. Deep down, I felt like she knew that. I knew there were no excuses that could rebuild what was broken. But I would still try. She was always good with words. He always knew how to manipulate situations to his advantage. But this time, there was nothing left that could be saved. When he finally decided to return, he didn't go home. He parked near a hotel and booked a room. I needed distance, I needed time. Crossing that door again now would not be a return home, but to a battlefield. And he didn't want to fight that war that night. Not yet. Inside the room, he sat on the edge of the bed and ran his hands over his face. The silence around was deafening. For the first time, I was truly alone. But this solitude was not empty. She was liberating. For the first time in years, he no longer had to worry about expectations, about appearances, about trying to be the perfect husband to someone who had never bothered to be a wife to him. Ethan took a deep breath. The night was ending, but its new beginning was just beginning. He didn't know exactly what it would be like from now on, but he knew one thing: Olivia was no longer part of his life. And now, all he had to do was move on. But before that, there was something else that needed to be resolved. Something he would not allow to end without consequences. And this time, he would make sure no one forgot what happened. Ethan woke up in his hotel room feeling the weight of fatigue dragging through his body. The room was still dark, only the faint light of the city filtered through the half-open curtains. He blinked a few times, trying to remember the exact moment he fell asleep, but everything was a blur. He picked up his cell phone from the bedside table and saw dozens of missed calls. Olivia had called repeatedly, sent messages that he hadn't bothered to open. There were also calls from unknown numbers, probably from mutual friends, trying to understand what had happened at the party. He sat on the bed, his elbows resting on his knees, rubbing his face hard as if he could erase reality with a simple gesture. But he couldn't. Everything was there, stuck in his mind like a red-hot iron. The betrayal, the humiliation, the revelation that Olivia had not only deceived him, but had done so for much longer than he could have imagined. And, more than that, she had been manipulated, used and blackmailed. But none of that absolved her. Nothing erased the choices she made. He took a deep breath before standing up, feeling the coldness of the ground beneath his bare feet. He opened the curtain and looked at the flashing lights of the buildings. Outside, the world continued its course, indifferent to the chaos that had taken place inside it. His mind kept asking the same question: what now? What to do with all this? I couldn't just ignore it, move on as if nothing had happened. But he also didn't want to let that betrayal define the rest of his life. He decided he needed to face Olivia. Avoiding the conversation would only prolong something inevitable. He got dressed quickly, grabbed his car keys and went down to the parking lot. The walk to his house was silent. The radio was off, the streets were empty, only steady breathing and a whirlwind of thoughts occupied his mind. When he parked in front of the house he built with Olivia, he hesitated for a moment. The house still looked the same, but now he saw everything differently. Every detail, every memory inside, was contaminated. When he opened the door, he found Olivia sitting on the sofa in the living room, her eyes fixed on him as soon as she entered. There was weariness on his face, a hint of barely concealed desperation. She held her cell phone in her hands, as if waiting for him to finally answer her calls. The environment was charged with tension. He closed the door behind him and remained there for a moment, watching her. She was the first to speak. The voice was low, cautious. "I thought you wouldn't be back so soon." He crossed his arms, leaning against the door. "I considered that option." Olivia looked down, biting her bottom lip before letting out a shaky breath. "Ethan. I don't even know where to start." He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Where to start? Well, maybe the fact that you cheated on me for months. Or maybe the part where your lover tried to humiliate me in front of everyone. Or better yet, we can talk about the fact that you already did this before and never had the decency to tell me." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if those words hit her physically. "I know I messed up. I know there's no excuse. Then why are you trying to justify yourself?" He took a step forward, his voice firm but not raising the tone. "I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know the truth. All of it." Olivia looked up, hesitation visible. "I wanted to tell you, but I was scared of losing you." He snorted in disbelief. "Afraid of losing me? Olivia, you already lost me. And it wasn't today, it wasn't yesterday. You lost me the moment you decided I wasn't enough." She ran her hands through her hair nervously. "It wasn't like that. I never wanted it to end like this. So how did you want it to end?" He took another step, his eyes fixed on her. "Did you expect me to never find out? For us to keep pretending? Tell me, Olivia, what did you really want?" She swallowed hard, but didn't respond right away. The silence between them became unbearable. Then, she finally said something he didn't expect. "I wanted to go back in time." Ethan let out an incredulous laugh. "Go back in time? For what? To do something different? To avoid being discovered? Because, honestly, I can't believe that if this situation hadn't blown up in your face, you would have stopped." Her eyes were full of tears now, but Ethan no longer felt sorry. He had already cried enough that night. I had already felt every stab of that betrayal and there was no room left for more suffering. He wanted answers, yes, but more than that, he wanted to free himself from it all. She sighed, rubbing her hands over her thighs as if trying to find the courage to speak. "I was unhappy. I don't know when it started, but I felt like something was wrong with me. That I wasn't the same anymore. And then, it happened. First it was one small thing, then another. And when I realized it, I was already stuck in it." "Pray." He raised his eyebrows, crossing his arms. "Or comfortable?" She shook her head, tears streaming now. "It wasn't comfort, it was a cycle. I knew I was wrong, but I couldn't get out of it." "But you managed to keep lying to me," he said, with a coldness that made her shudder. "That you managed without any problems." She didn't deny it. He just nodded, as if he finally accepted that there was no way out of his guilt. "I wanted to make things right. To repair." He laughed, but there was no joy there. "There's no fix for this, Olivia. And you know it." She closed her eyes for a moment before whispering. And what happens now? Ethan was silent for a while, just watching her. That woman in front of him, who he had loved for so many years, now seemed like a stranger. Everything they built was ruined. But at that moment, he realized that his decision had already been made long before that conversation. He took a deep breath before responding. Now, I move on. Without you. Olivia closed her eyes, letting out a quiet sob. But he didn't stay to see her full reaction. Without saying anything else, he turned and walked to the door. Before leaving, he looked at her one last time. And in that look, there was no more love. Just the end of a story that had already come to an end. And then, he closed the door behind him. And for the first time in a long time, he felt free. The days passed like a blur in Ethan's life. The divorce process was initiated without delay, and Olivia, without many options, did not contest anything. She tried to communicate a few times, tried to convince him that there might be a way to rebuild what they had lost, but every word of hers sounded empty, weightless, without any effect on him. What had once been a love story was now nothing more than a closed chapter, a book he would never open again. There was no anger, not anymore. Just an emptiness, a cold acceptance of what had happened. Olivia's lover, on the other hand, didn't have such a simple ending. His name began to circulate unfavorably among social and professional circles. The reputation he cherished was tarnished by the very game he thought he controlled. His blackmailing of other women was exposed after one of them found the courage to report him. With the truth out, he lost his job and became persona non grata in many places. People who once respected him now saw him for who he really was. And without the power of manipulation on his side, he was nothing more than an insignificant man, lost in his own ruin. Olivia, in turn, experienced loneliness in a way she had never known. Her friends began to move away, not because they judged her betrayal, but because they realized that the woman she had become was no longer the same woman they once knew. Her name became the topic of whispered conversations, and the shadow of what she did followed her wherever she went. It wasn't just the loss of Ethan that weighed on her, but the weight of all the wrong choices she had made. In a last desperate attempt to get back on her feet, she tried to get back together with an old coworker, but soon realized that he, like everyone else, only saw her as a woman who threw away everything she had for something fleeting and worthless. Ethan, on the other hand, moved on. He didn't close himself off from the world, he didn't let pain define who he was. There were difficult nights, moments of heavy silence when his past came back to haunt him, but he refused to be a prisoner of that history. He focused on work, on friendships that remained true, and most importantly, on himself. And it was in this process that he met someone who wasn't trying to mend a broken heart, but rather share a new story, clean, sincere, real. Little by little, without rushing, he realized that there was still room for love. But this time, no illusions. Time has been merciless to all of them, but for Ethan, it has brought something he never imagined he would feel again, peace. Olivia, on the other hand, lived in her own prison, surrounded by the ghosts of her choices. Her lover disappeared from her life as quickly as he appeared, and she was left alone to deal with the consequences of his actions. The world she built on lies fell apart, and she realized, too late, that some losses are irreparable. Ethan never looked back. The past was a lesson, not an anchor. He moved forward, and this time, without fear. If you've made it this far, I want to know your opinion. What did you think of this story? Do you believe that people who cheat deserve a second chance or that betrayal is unforgivable? Comment and share your view on this story. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more impactful stories like this. Here, betrayal is never romanticized, because we know that every choice has consequences. Until the next story.